June said, I'm Eric Schupelz, research botanist and curator here at the National Museum of Natural History, and I have the pleasure of introducing today's first speaker, Dr. Lucia Lohman. Dr. Lohman earned her PhD from the University of Missouri, St. Louis, where she studied the biogeography and evolutionary history of the flowering plant family Bignoniaceae. For many years, she held a faculty position at the University of Sao Paulo, and more recently served as the director of the university and Jepson Herbaria and professor in the Department of Integrative Biology at the University of California, Berkeley. At present, Dr. Lohman is the president and director of the Missouri Botanical Garden and a George Engelman Professor of Botany at Washington University in St. Louis, where she is deeply involved in efforts to study and conserve biodiversity worldwide. Today, she'll speak on biodiversity and innovation, bringing herbaria to their full potential. Okay, wasn't sure.
Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you so much to all of you who are here today. Thank you also for the people assisting and listening to us online, and many thanks for the invitation. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. So we have very diverse audience with people from different backgrounds, and we thought we would start this session with a broad overview about herbaria, and starting by reminding us of the importance of these collections, and then also talking about some opportunities of herbaria in the 21st century, and wrapping up with some possibilities for uses of herbaria data to address some global changes. So I like to think of herbaria as plant libraries that are really the foundation of all plant research, right? So naming species, this is really the foundation of everything we do. They're really windows into the past, and they really kind of serve as time capsules, allowing us to really look in detail at plant morphology, chemistry, and DNA of species over time. And this is really, of course, the foundation of plant taxonomy, ecology, evolution, and biogeography. Herbaria also house books. So in several places, the libraries are part of the herbaria, or they're located close to the herbaria. And together, the specimens and the books allow us to tell lots of very interesting stories, not only of plants, but also of people. And of course, they also serve as lots of inspiration for botanical art. Some of the botanical books from the 19th, 16th, well, even 16th century have the most amazing art I've seen. And above all, herbaria are really collaborative spaces that really allow for extensive teamwork and collaboration. And we think about it at a time when we are losing a lot of species, the immense value of herbaria is actually only going to increase over time. And in some ways, I often think about the value of herbaria as something that is still untapped. There's so much that we still have to do. And in part is because the science of naming things is kind of a slow science and develops slowly. And so one of the biggest challenges that we have for the 21st century is really to accelerate taxonomy. If we think about it, the list of plant names is constantly evolving. And in fact, if we continue to describe species at the same rate that we are doing right now, it's going to take a long time. For fungi in particular, some estimates say that we would take around 750 to 1,000 years to fully describe all the world's fungi. All of us who do taxonomic revisions and do herbarium work and field work, every single taxonomic revision, we always find so many novelties and generally new species. In fact, every single trip I do to the Amazon basin, we always bring nearly a dozen species, new species back home. So when we think about accelerating taxonomy, the first step is of course, digitizing our collections and making them available. And I was thrilled to hear that the Smithsonian has completed the digitization, which is really fantastic. But unfortunately, that's not really the case for the rest of the world. And so when we look at biodiversity collections in general, it's estimated that around 200 million materials have been digitized, but we still have 3 billion records to go. So this means that at the current pace, we would actually need around 100 years to achieve a full digitization of all the biological collections. Many institutions are finding different ways to accelerate specimen digitization, sometimes using a conveyor belt, sometimes using different approaches. And at the Missouri Botanical Garden, where I am right now, we have been able to digitize 2 million specimens over the last decades, and we still have 6 million more to go. But thankfully, due to a recent donation, we were able to allocate the resources and to complete the digitization within the next 5 years. And so hopefully, if we all do things right, all the digitized collections will then really serve the basis for a global herbarium in a place where we can all integrate all of our collections in a unified portal somehow, so we can actually compare our identifications and use specimens in different institutions to help curate our materials. Of course, everything depends on high-quality species identification. And when we look at different herbaria, the quality of species identification varies quite a bit. And in fact, a recent study showed that approximately 60% of herbarium specimens are still misidentified. And in fact, around 75% of all undescribed species, they are thought to be already deposited in collections, but still being misidentified or languishing in an unidentified backlog. And in a recent study from the Atlantic forest, it was shown that between 68 to 82% of all the specimen records for different plant families from the Atlantic forest of Brazil, they could not be used in spatial analyses due to low data quality. So between 68 to 82% of the data deposited in GBIF. So we still have a lot to do in terms of data curation. Thankfully, technology is helping us a bit, and there's some new technology such as hyperspectral scanning and also machine learning approaches that are really helping us to automate plant species identifications and also allowing us to do high throughput phenotyping. So through some of those technologies, we are able to capture different traits in a very high speed. So, for example, around 2 people over the course of 3 days, they are able to gather leaf traits for around 10,000 specimens, which is really remarkable and can really help accelerate our activities. But of course, for us to be able to develop those libraries and use those specimens for different things, we need to have the correct names. So as much as artificial intelligence can help us identify species that we know already, have very clear understanding of species boundaries and so forth, before we do that, we actually have to have the names themselves. So, of course, when we think about the taxonomic impediment, it's actually more of a shortage of taxonomists rather than a lack of technological approaches. We do need technology to help expedite things, but training is really the main priority. And I guess this is probably one of our main tasks actually for the next decade. And so, but thankfully, I feel there's quite a few new opportunities for training in biodiversity, and especially if we treat biodiversity data like data science. And so this really allows integrating data, analyzing complex concepts and theory, and development of critical thinking and problem solving while asking biodiversity related questions. So this kind of hands-on exposure to the scientific method and also inquiry-based learning is really the best possible training that one could get. To accelerate training in taxonomy, I also feel we need to move from a solitary activity into taxonomy as a team sport. And I think we did quite a bit of that over the last few decades. So when we look back at Decandoll or von Martius, it was pretty much a solitary activity, and we're growing into turning taxonomy into a team sport, but we still have quite a bit to go. But thankfully, also some of the virtual tools and virtual data are really providing wonderful spaces for collaborative work and also allowing us to annotate specimens online and to help curate data, while we also are able to georeference specimens in efficient ways and using common practices that allows the data georeference in different locations to be equivalent. So still quite a bit of data cleaning, quite a bit of data curation to do, lots and lots of training, which should probably be our main priority in the next few decades. And once we have all that data in hand, another thing we really need to do is to synthesize the data. And in multiple recent conferences that I attended, one of which was in Rwanda last summer, while talking to many policymakers, they kept saying, we really want to incorporate high quality science into several of our decisions, but we want a unified platform, a place where we can go and find the information we need. So for policymakers, it's really hard to go to different treatments and try to find the unified information. So we really need to work towards synthesizing things into unified platforms. One first attempt to do that is the World Flora Online, which is through the taxonomic expert networks, really bringing people together after a first stage when a lot of artificial intelligence actually was used to compile the information. Now having the validation by experts could really be a very important step forward. And of course, visualizing the data is also something that we can really benefit from also. Finding good ways to map traits in multiple formats, or looking at spatial patterns of phylogenetics, or looking at spatial distribution patterns in different ways, and asking questions that could really allow us to understand how biodiversity was formed in some of these different locations. So we've done a lot, but we still have quite a bit of work towards synthesizing and being able to gather information in different formats. And okay, so digitizing, curating, training, synthesizing. The next step to accelerate taxonomy really is how we distribute data. And in general, I feel we have fantastic databases in different institutions, but these databases are usually focused just for scientists, right? And a lot of the general public actually is not able to access some of this information. And in fact, when we try to get them to use the databases, they're not so happy because they don't think it's too friendly. So one question I've been really asking myself in the last few years is, so who would we'd like our collections users to be, right? And I really like to think of herbaria, and now, well, a virtual herbaria, as hubs of everything plants. And from my perspective, I really would like these collections to be places where everybody interested in plants could go and find the information that they need. And not just the information from the specimen itself, but also all the extended specimen data. So including the photographs, including the distribution data, the tissue samples, the DNA extractions, the evolutionary analyses, and so forth. When we look at the uses we have done of all of our herbarium data and, well, biodiversity data in general, we have mostly used it for species distribution, diversity and population analyses, for data papers, for taxonomy, conservation, but there's a lot of other uses that we are just starting to explore. So maybe by providing the data in formats that are more accessible and that allow for different searches will really allow us to diversify the uses, improve the recognition and the value of these collections. In fact, so many times, even my daughters who are in school come to me looking for information for plants, and they have a hard time finding a portal where information can be found. So I often keep thinking that in addition to the databases that we have that are more focused for scientists, maybe we can find ways to also present the information in different ways with different channels that would be accessible to different people. So let's say even a school kid could go in and look through data storytelling, look at information from plants, and find the information in different formats. We're going through a stage, an age of data overload, and it's really hard to know what is robust data and what is not. So by providing trustworthy data through our different portals in formats that are really accessible to a variety of users, regardless of their interest in plants, would really be a fantastic way to bridge academia, also with government and society, and bring everybody on board about the importance of nature and help us to really address some of the global challenges ahead. And in fact, when we think about a more sustainable planet and we look at the Sustainable Development Agenda, nearly every single item has a connection with nature and plants. So in fact, if we think about it, some of the solutions to global change, they may actually be hidden in the herbaria themselves. We already use quite a bit of herbarium data for conservation and for reforestation, but there's still many other opportunities that we could use this data for. So for example, inspiring construction inspired by nature, or biomaterials, biomimicry and design, new foods and medicines, which are especially critical at a time when we have economically important plants that are very dear to us, like chocolate and coffee, that have a risk of maybe going extinct in a couple decades. And in some ways, exploring these additional uses of herbaria might also bring us back to its origin, and the origins of herbaria, which was with the herbalists who are really interested in medicines and herbs. So I really feel like we still have huge unexplored potential for herbaria, and if we can present this information in ways that are really accessible and that will allow people to look for plant services for humankind, then we might indeed be able to unite herbaria to build a green, sustainable earth, and probably then really bring herbaria to their full potential. Thank you so much.
We do have time for a few questions if there are any, either online or in person. Great. I will again emphasize that there will be a panel discussion at the end. So if you're holding on to something, oh, I'm sorry. Could you step up to the microphone so the folks online can hear as well? Yeah. Could you step up to the microphone? Thanks. The folks online won't be able to hear otherwise. Appreciate it.
One question I have was, you showed one bar graph earlier when you talked about like digitizing all the herbariums and that they were mislabeled. On the graph, it said that they were being disregarded. So are you guys throwing away the ones that are not being ID'd or so? Or I might have just misread the graph, but I thought it said discarded material.
I'm not sure which graph was that, but one thing I do want to emphasize is that, yeah, our approach to digitizing is really to put in all the model clades and the information that is really high quality first, and really try to put a lot of effort into training and curating the collections before actually digitizing them. So
With,
we,
with poor quality material, do you consider discarding it or do you keep it all? Like,
Oh.
let's say something's falling apart or, it's degraded.
no, everything is kept unless it's just in conditions that, are really bad or something, but all the specimens are kept. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Lucy, for this great talk. You presented a very optimistic approach toward herbaria. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the threats to herbaria. I mean, I think that the Smithsonian or the Missouri Botanical Garden might be very well funded and well taken care of, but isn't there a problem that botanical gardens are also under threats at the same time we're appreciating their value?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And in fact, your question is the foundation of all my thinking behind herbaria and observing different herbaria in different places, including Latin America and Africa, and just thinking of creative new ways that we can really put the value of herbaria, explore different potential uses and so forth. They're certainly under threat, and certainly the number of taxonomists is something that worries me the most also. I come from Brazil, which is a country that has a long tradition in taxonomy, and lots of taxonomists, around 1,000 of us worked on the floor of Brazil to put it together. But even in Brazil, we do see a decline in taxonomists. So I think we need to think outside the box and think creatively. I'm an optimistic person by heart, but it's certainly something we need to be worried about.
Hi, Lucia. Thanks so much for that. That was a really insightful tour, I think, of the relevance of herbaria in the past as well as now. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in is how we go forward in terms of populating herbaria in the future, given that they are a reasonably comprehensive record of biodiversity, and we know where the unknowns are, so we know what the biodiversity dark spots are. So as a global herbarium community, what are your views on how we collect specimens in future? Thank you.
Excellent question too. So, well, first of all, I love what you mentioned. So collecting in the unknown regions, and that's actually has been something I have been trying to do myself, and going to collect in places that nobody had ever collected. So we have this project to go to unexplored mountain ranges in the Amazon basin. We did 2 different trips. We have another one in November this year where we go to places that have never been visited by anybody before. And the outcome was not a new species, not a new genus, but a new family of frogs. So if we're finding things of that nature for vertebrates, imagine in terms of species and so forth. Now, in terms of populating herbaria, and one thing I see more the pattern is, so if we think in the past, a lot of the collections were done when there were no herbaria locally, right? So, which was a very different time. Nowadays, I see a lot of really strong herbaria developing in different parts of the world, and I'm seeing really the importance of the local herbaria and growing these collections in a way that they can really monitor closely by being close to the collections, collecting fruits and flowers and following all the phenology and have really a long-term and continuous record of specimens. So in some ways, in my mind, I'm seeing really a very big role for the growth of these local collections, which will really allow us to have this very long time record for species in particular region. And if we're able to build a local, a global virtual herbaria, which I hope we will, and could be something modular where we all put our collections over there and help each other identify, then it's really good to have these local collections connecting to this global community. So in my mind, I see more of the local efforts, and then collectively we build our knowledge for biodiversity.